Nobody expected me to ever stand up for myself. From the very beginning, I had been the family's invisible shadow, the one whose accomplishments were ignored and whose presence barely registered. Birthdays passed with forgotten gifts, while my siblings received lavish presents and endless praise for the smallest achievements. At family dinners, I would sit quietly in the corner, my plate barely touched, while conversations swirled around me, my opinions brushed aside like dust. I learned early on that raising my voice invited ridicule rather than acknowledgement. Even small victories at school or work were met with polite nods from my parents, while my cousins' successes became the stories everyone relished telling. Every slight was compounded by the favoritism that ran so openly in my family. The way my older brother's every word was treated as law, the way my sister could demand attention and get it instantly. I lived in a constant state of anticipation and disappointment, longing to be noticed, yet knowing I probably never would be. The emotional tension was exhausting, a quiet storm brewing inside me, feeding a sense of invisibility and a simmering resentment that I didn't yet understand. But beneath it all, a small spark of defiance waited, impatient to be kindled. It started with a letter I wasn't supposed to see. Tucked between old bills in the family safe, it revealed everything. The inheritance my parents always promised would be shared equally was quietly being rerouted to my siblings. My heart pounded as I read the details. Accounts, properties, investments, all listed under their names, while mine didn't even appear. For a moment, disbelief froze me, but then it was replaced by a slow-burning anger that clawed at my chest. How could they betray me like this, after everything I had sacrificed and endured? The memories of being ignored, belittled, and overlooked flooded back with painful clarity, and I realized this wasn't just neglect. It was deliberate. I felt the weight of every slight and insult, and in that moment, a sense of clarity emerged. I didn't have to remain powerless. There had to be a way to turn the tables, to force recognition, and demand the justice I deserved. The thought ignited a fierce resolve in me, a quiet determination that I would no longer be invisible, a plan forming in my mind that hinted at the first tremors of power reversal waiting just ahead. I remembered every long night I stayed awake, nursing a sick sibling while my parents were too busy celebrating the other children's milestones to notice. I remembered skipping meals so my younger cousins could have seconds, tutoring my brother's friends for weeks without a thank you, and quietly covering for my sister's mistakes at work, absorbing the blame when things went wrong. Each act of selflessness had gone unacknowledged, as if my efforts were invisible, my sacrifices expected rather than appreciated. Socially, I endured constant embarrassment, being dismissed at gatherings, overlooked in conversations, and laughed at for having too little ambition or not enough charm. It was exhausting, the weight of being perpetually unseen pressing down on me like a heavy fog. Yet, within the quiet of those memories, a seed of determination began to take root. I started imagining ways to assert myself, to make my voice heard and my value undeniable. The thought of quietly, carefully turning the situation around offered a small comfort, a glimpse of agency I had never allowed myself to feel. For the first time in years, I felt the stirring of a plan forming, subtle but sharp, like a knife hidden beneath velvet, waiting for the right moment. The final straw came at my cousin's engagement party. A gathering that should have been festive but quickly turned into another reminder of my family's disregard. As I arrived, my greeting was met with awkward silence, then laughter, as if I had walked into a joke I wasn't supposed to understand. My uncle leaned over to my parents and whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "Why even bring her? She never contributes to anything." My cheeks burned with shame, the familiar sting of exclusion sharpening into something more potent, outrage. I tried to retreat into the background, but every smile directed at my siblings, every casual compliment I was denied, felt like a deliberate spotlight on my inferiority. They didn't even notice how their words cut, or perhaps they did, and that was the cruelty. In that moment, FOMO became unbearable. I wasn't just unseen, I was irrelevant, replaced by the people they preferred to celebrate. The laughter, the whispers, the open favoritism ignited a fury that I could no longer contain. The injustice wasn't subtle this time. It was public, undeniable, and it forced me to confront the truth. I could no longer stay silent, and the reckoning I had begun planning had to start now. I spent weeks quietly gathering every scrap of evidence I could find. Each document and email a weapon I would wield when the time was right. Late at night, I met with trusted friends and a lawyer who understood both the law and the stakes, careful not to alert a single family member. Every conversation, every strategy session, felt like moving chess pieces on a board where one wrong move could expose me prematurely. I thought constantly about the past, the dismissals, the stolen opportunities, the hidden betrayals, and it fueled a careful, calculated anger. They think I'm powerless. They think I'll never act. Let them continue underestimating me, I reminded myself, feeling a rush of grim satisfaction at the thought of the surprise to come. Each step forward tightened the suspense, each plan carefully layered so that when the moment arrived, it would hit with maximum impact. And as I sealed the final piece of evidence in my folder, a shiver of anticipation ran through me. The day I walked into the courtroom was drawing near, and I could already imagine the shock on their faces. The moment I stepped into the courtroom, every eye turned toward me, and I felt the weight of decades of invisibility crashing into a single electrifying instant. The judge's brow lifted in surprise. My family's mouths hung open, and even the murmurs of strangers in the gallery seemed to pause in anticipation. I remembered the countless times I had been ignored, the birthday dinners where I sat quietly while my siblings were praised, the humiliations I endured silently. But none of that mattered now. I stood tall, shoulders back, exuding a confidence I had spent years cultivating in private, and the difference was staggering. This was the same person who had once slunk into family gatherings, trying not to be noticed, yet now I carried the weight of my preparation like armor, every document in my briefcase a silent testament to my determination. The contrast was undeniable. Powerless no longer, invisible no longer, the underdog who had been overlooked had transformed into someone unignorable. A tremor of fear and disbelief rippled through the room, and in that charged silence, I knew the first domino had fallen. My presence alone was a statement, and the game had officially begun. The judge's voice cut through the tense silence. "And you are?" he asked, eyes narrowing as they swept over me. I felt my pulse quicken but kept my posture steady, a faint smile tugging at my lips. "I'm here to address matters that concern my family," I replied, letting the weight of those words hang in the air. My parents exchanged a glance, disbelief etched across their faces, while my siblings smirked, clearly expecting a stumble, an apology, or a retreat. "I didn't think you had standing in this case," my father said, his tone sharp, the arrogance dripping like venom. I met his gaze evenly, letting the quiet confidence I'd spent months building speak for me. All those years of being dismissed, of being overlooked, and now the tables have turned, I thought. Each document, every meticulous note, felt like armor, shielding me from the contempt in the room. My mother's lips pressed into a tight line. My brother shifted uneasily, and for the first time I sensed the faint tremor of uncertainty in their composure. Power was no longer theirs alone. I had arrived, prepared, and suddenly the balance of authority felt different. I opened my briefcase with deliberate slowness, letting the rustle of papers echo through the courtroom. "Your Honor, I have documentation that I believe will clarify my position," I said, my voice calm, but carrying a quiet authority. The murmurs in the room grew louder, and my family exchanged uneasy glances. My father's smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second, and I felt a thrill run through me. One by one, I laid out evidence of financial mismanagement, hidden inheritance diversions, and contracts that had been altered without my knowledge. I could see my siblings lean forward, disbelief and growing panic mirrored in their eyes. Then my lawyer, who I had trusted implicitly, presented testimony from an unexpected witness, someone my family had assumed would remain loyal to them. The air shifted, a subtle but undeniable tremor of uncertainty spreading through the room. For the first time, they realized they had underestimated me, that the person they dismissed as powerless had carefully prepared a strategic, undeniable case. My internal pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the exhilaration of reversal. The balance of power was tipping, and I finally saw their confidence crack. This was no longer just about proof, It was about reclaiming respect, asserting presence, and making the invisible undeniable. My brother leaned forward, voice sharp and dripping with contempt. "You've no right to be here." "Everything you think you deserve was earned by us," he spat, eyes narrowing, trying to intimidate me with his arrogance. I met his glare without flinching, letting a slow, controlled calm settle over me. "I didn't take anything that wasn't rightfully mine," I replied evenly. "But it seems many things were quietly taken from me for years." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as my parents fidgeted, their carefully maintained composure starting to crack. My sister scoffed. "We've always supported you. How dare you make accusations now?" I let a faint, ironic smile play across my lips. "Support?" I asked softly, my voice carrying across the room. "Is that what you call ignoring my sacrifices? Mocking my achievements? And publicly humiliating me while celebrating everyone else?" The moral tension in the room was tangible, a tug-of-war between long-held authority and the truth that I had painstakingly assembled. Every detail I revealed, every calm rebuttal, struck at their arrogance, forcing empathy and outrage to collide. I could feel the audience shifting, leaning forward as if they too had lived through the slights I recounted, sensing the deep injustice finally being exposed. I had become the voice for every overlooked effort, every ignored act of loyalty, and in that charged silence, I knew the tide of perception was irrevocably turning. I took a deep breath and presented the final piece, the one I had saved for maximum impact. "Your Honor, I have uncovered documents that reveal not only the hidden inheritance, but also evidence of deliberate manipulation by my family to divert assets away from me," I said, spreading the papers across the table with measured precision. A hush fell over the courtroom. My father's jaw tightened, and my siblings' eyes widened in shock, their confidence crumbling before my gaze. "These contracts," I continued, "show transactions executed without my consent, funds funneled into accounts I was never meant to access, and promises made to me in writing that were quietly broken." The lawyer beside me added witness testimony that corroborated every claim, exposing years of deceit and favoritism that had gone unnoticed by outsiders. The gallery stirred, whispers of disbelief spreading like wildfire. My mother's hands trembled slightly as she reached for a tissue, and my brother's smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by a pale, unsettled stare. I could feel the courtroom's energy shift, the second power reversal in motion. I, once dismissed as insignificant, now commanded attention, authority, and respect. The shock on my family's faces was mirrored by the rising murmurs of approval and validation from everyone else present. I had not only revealed the truth, but had seized public recognition for the first time in my life, leaving my antagonists exposed, humiliated, and utterly unprepared for the justice I had orchestrated. The judge leaned forward, his eyes locking onto my family with a weight I had never seen directed at them before. After reviewing the evidence, the testimonies, and the documents presented, he began, voice steady and commanding. "It is clear that the claims of mismanagement and diversion are valid. The court rules in favor of the plaintiff." Gasps echoed through the room, my parents' faces draining of color. My father stammered, This can't be..." But the judge raised a hand. "The law has spoken, and justice must prevail." My siblings shifted uncomfortably, their arrogance evaporating in the wake of undeniable truth. The gallery erupted in murmurs of astonishment, whispers of validation and support washing over me. I felt a surge of relief, my chest swelling as years of neglect and humiliation were finally acknowledged and corrected. The symbolic justice was complete, the assets redistributed, the manipulations exposed, and the moral balance restored. My mother sat silently, shame evident in her eyes. My brother's jaw was tight, pride shattered, and my sister turned away, unable to meet anyone's gaze. I stood there, absorbing the moment, feeling every slight, every insult, every act of erasure being acknowledged and rectified. The courtroom, once a place of fear and doubt, had become the arena of my empowerment, the stage on which years of invisibility were finally transformed into undeniable recognition. I had won, not just legally, but emotionally, morally, and publicly, and the look of stunned realization on their faces was a payoff worth every long night of planning. every quiet sacrifice and every ignored effort of my past. As I walked out of the courtroom, the weight that had pressed on me for years finally lifted, leaving a quiet, steady warmth in its place. I remembered the countless times I had felt invisible, dismissed, and powerless. Birthdays ignored, achievements overlooked, moments of humiliation that once cut so deeply. Each memory had been a shadow, reminding me of my insignificance in a family that never saw me. Yet now, standing in the sunlight outside, I felt the stark contrast of who I had become, acknowledged, respected, and undeniably present. The justice I had fought for was more than legal. It was emotional, moral, and deeply personal. I had transformed years of pain into strength, proving to myself that resilience and careful planning could overturn even the most entrenched patterns of favoritism and betrayal. Still, the victory was bittersweet. I couldn't erase the years of neglect or reclaim the time lost. But I had claimed something even more valuable, my dignity, my voice in the undeniable truth of my worth. Every step forward felt like a reclamation, and for the first time, I truly felt seen. A week later, I sat in my new office, sunlight streaming across polished surfaces that once would have felt impossible to enter. The promotion I had quietly earned, now publicly recognized, was more than a title. It was a symbol of every effort I had made in silence, every sacrifice that had gone unnoticed. Friends and colleagues offered congratulations, their genuine smiles a stark contrast to the dismissive glances I had endured at family gatherings. I allowed myself a private moment of triumph, savoring the quiet satisfaction of having proven my worth without bending to anyone's expectations. Even better, the financial security and acknowledgement that had been denied for years were finally mine, achieved through patience, strategy, and unwavering resolve. The karmic balance was undeniable. Those who had mocked, ignored, and underestimated me had witnessed the reversal of roles, the long overdue recognition, and the power I had quietly amassed. I leaned back in my chair, a smile curling across my face, knowing the taste of victory was both sweet and fully earned. As I stood by the window, looking out at the city that had always felt just out of reach, I reflected on everything that had led me here, the betrayals, the silences, the endless waiting for recognition that never came. Yet, in that waiting, I had learned patience, strategy, and the quiet power of resilience. I smiled to myself, knowing that the smallest acts of preparation, the careful gathering of evidence, and the unwavering belief in my own worth had shifted everything. And there was one detail my family would never know, a clause I had quietly inserted, ensuring that certain privileges they had assumed were theirs would remain forever inaccessible to them, a subtle but permanent reminder of the lessons they had forced me to learn. The past could not be undone, but the present was mine to command, and the future belonged to no one but me. I felt whole, validated, and stronger than ever. Proof that even the most overlooked, the most dismissed, could rise and claim the justice, respect, and power they had always deserved.